All right, today you're going to be reading about either Plato or Aristotle, two giants of Western philosophy. But before you study and read about them, we're going to learn a little bit about Socrates. You need to know about the granddaddy of them all, right? Socrates is going to be the teacher of Plato, Plato, the teacher of Aristotle. Aristotle, the father of Western science and philosophy. All right, so let's take a look at the life of Socrates. So who was he? Well, he was an Athenian. He was from Greece. And he lived probably around 469 to 399 BC. I'm going to say probably a lot because we don't have a lot of great resources about his life. We have conflicting resources, but we can piece together a pretty decent picture of who he was. He's been described in a lot of ways, never as attractive. He didn't consider himself a teacher. Why didn't he consider himself a teacher? Well, he was a student. He was a philosopher. He had questions, not answers. And that's why he considered himself more of a student than a teacher. All right. In Athenian culture, he and thinkers like him were valued. They were at odds with, these philosophers were at odds with people that were called sophists. Those sophists were those that used powerful rhetoric to try and convince people that they did know the answers, whereas the philosophers used questions to show them that they actually didn't. You might think of today's distinction between philosophers and perhaps politicians. All right, so Socrates, the philosopher. We often consider his life to be the paradigm for the philosophic life. He said famously, an unexamined life is not worth living. He spent his days, his evenings, his mornings contemplating what he believed to be the most important questions in life, what we today consider to be philosophical questions. Never wrote a word. This was all through dialogue, all through conversation. It was a back and forth conversation with his students, with the sophists, with politicians. He would have conversations and thus come up with new questions. And he found that the more he learned, the less he knew. And that was kind of the paradox that drove his inquiry. His trial and his death are the founding myth of the discipline of philosophy. So let me just give you a quick overview summary of the trial of Socrates, the Apology, as it's known. Plato wrote this. Socrates was told by the oracle at Delphi, who was never wrong, that he was the wisest man in all of Athens, but he could not accept that because if he knew anything, he knew that he didn't know anything. Right, so he went from community to community and just interviewed people and asked people questions and found that there was great wisdom, but eventually it would break down as people thought that they held all the answers or had all the answers to his questions. What he came to realize was that he actually was the wisest man in Athens because he knew that he didn't really know anything and that life was really about asking questions rather than thinking you had solid answers, right? So this is kind of Socrates' paradigm. Now, he upsets a lot of people along the way, and he eventually gets convicted of a crime in Athens for irreverence towards the gods, and ultimately he'll be executed, right? And so he will die. He'll voluntarily, we'll talk about this in the spring, but he'll voluntarily drink poison that was given to him. He'll be given an opportunity to escape by some of his friends, but he doesn't think that's the right thing to do. So Socrates, the philosopher. There is a Socratic problem. There's a lot of debate about who Socrates actually really was. While there's not a lot of serious debate about whether or not he actually existed, there is pretty good consensus around the fact that he actually existed as a human being in Athens. There's no consistency on the historical accuracy of the sources that we have about him. Some we believe were written as historical sources, but a lot of others were written as poetic license. And Plato, who was one of his students, may have taken a lot of license to use Socrates as an example. So we're going to read a lot of Plato's dialogues, and Socrates is always going to be a character. So it's hard to know whether those words are Socrates' words or just Socrates speaking Plato's words, right? There were others who wrote about Socrates like Xenophon and Aristophanes. Sometimes these were for entertainment. Sometimes, again, they were for history. So Socrates, what you need to remember about Socrates is he's kind of the paradigmatic philosopher in the West. He spent his days and nights asking questions. This is why we call Socratic seminars that are rooted in wrestling with questions Socratic seminars. Socratic method is a method of questioning. He was all about the questions. He's going to inspire his student Plato, who will inspire his student Aristotle, and that's who you're going to read about now. So go learn about Plato and Aristotle and their contributions to Western thought.